Hello and welcome to the monthly Azure Infrastructure Announcements Recap. My name is Patrick Svoboda and I will be your host for today. Before we get started, I want to go over a couple of items. Not all provider announcements are mentioned, only the ones that are related to the infrastructure aspects. Today we are covering announcements from mid-December 2022 to the end of January 2023, so about roughly 45 days. If interested, I'm also doing AWS and GCP monthly announcements, so check them out. And on a final note, also if you're in the Austin area, I run monthly Austin Cloud Infrastructure Meetup sessions. The next one will take place on February 23rd, 2023. And more info is at meetup.com/Austin Cloud Infra. Let's get started. Data Explorer supports ingestion of data from Log4j with the release of new Log4j2 sync. The sync allows you to easily stream your log data to Azure Data Explorer, where you can analyze, visualize, and alert on your logs in real time. Azure Backup for SAP HANA, that's self-explanatory. Azure Dedicated Host Restart. You basically, if you're using dedicated hosts on Azure, it lets you to restart the host itself, and the VMs will restart while staying on the same underlying physical hardware. Usually, the use case for a dedicated host would be, maybe a government, DoD, or maybe some financial companies. But this is a great feature. I looked, for example, on AWS regarding dedicated hosts, and it does not look like on AWS you can restart your dedicated hosts. General availability, Active Directory authentication for exporting and importing managed disks. Enables the system to validate the identity of the requesting user in Azure AD and verify that the user has the required permissions to export and import that disk. Azure AD authentication with Azure Database for MySQL, flexible server. General availability, Active Directory authentication for SQL Server 2022. Basically extends existing authentication methods, SQL authentication, and Windows authentication. Encryption using CMK for Azure Database for PostgreSQL, flexible server. Up to now, only servers managed encryption keys for storage, encryption of data at rest. You were able to configure, but with the new feature, CMK adds a second layer of protection by encrypting service managed keys with customer managed keys. In preview, Azure Cosmos Database version 2 connector for Power BI, the import data in your dashboards using the direct query mode, in addition to the previously available import mode. In preview, Azure NetApp files cross-zone replication. This is to replicate your NetApp file volumes asynchronously from one Azure AZ to another in the same region. Azure Arc-enabled servers in Azure China. Arc-enabled servers let you manage Windows and Linux physical servers and VMs hosted outside of Azure on your corporate network or other cloud providers. Database for MySQL, flexible server data encryption with CMK. Bring your own key for data protection at rest. In preview, Container Insight support for Azure Kubernetes Service hybrid clusters. Enable Azure Monitor Container Insights for Lifecycle Manage AKS and Azure Stack HCI. Identify key resource bottlenecks. Analyze the overall controller or path performance. Configure alerts when your resource utilization exceeds desired thresholds. General availability, mount Azure Storage as local share in app service window code. configure persistent storage, ability to map a virtual directory, make static content readily available for your app service app, write archive application log files, and share content. General availability, application security groups, ASG, support for private endpoints, add granular controls on top of existing network security groups by attaching an ASG to private endpoint network interface. This will increase segregation between your subnets without losing security rules. In preview, incremental snapshot for ultra disk storage. This is in Sweden Central and US West 3 Azure regions. This lets you create backups, copy of their data store on disks to recover from accidental deletes and other use cases. Feature enhancements to Azure Web Application Firewall, runs on Azure Front Door and Azure's regional WAF running an application gateway, SQL injection and across-site scripts, detection queries, Azure policies for WAF logging, increase exclusion limit, board manager rules, set exclusion rules, and uppercase transform and custom rules. General availability, apply Azure Storage access tiers to append blobs and page blobs with blob type conversion. Azure Storage access tiers include hot tier, cold tier, and archive tier. Azure Storage access tiers support only blobs natively. So to save costs of storing append blobs or page blobs, you can convert them to block blobs, then move them into the most cost-efficient tiers based on your access patterns. This will help you save money. And that's all for the Azure announcements. Thank you.